Hi everyone, good evening, and thank you for joining our remote class on Green IT Get Started with Eco Design. So this evening,
Hi everyone, good evening, and thank you for joining our remote class on
so today we are going to talk with Tim and myself. We will have a lot of things to share with you. First, Tim is going to share a bunch of different insights on how to create. Well, what are the different things that we have to look at when we talk about Green IT, basically? And then I'm going to jump in and talk a bit more about eco design itself. So yeah, you're in for at least an hour of sharing and content. Do not hesitate to put your questions in the chat, right, inside the live tube. Oh, there is an echo. All right. I hope that it stopped. Yeah, I should have make it stop. Right, if it persists, okay, now it's good. Thank you. All right. So do not hesitate here to use the chat and ask your questions and all. When you have relevant questions, we'll put them out there and we'll try to reply as much as we can. So, all right, let's start right now. Just a moment, get us set up. Okay, so Green IT, let's get started with eco design. Okay, so let's start with that. The idea of Green IT, sometimes people can ask themselves, the environmental impact of the digital economy is negligible. One of the main reasons why they say that is that Green IT, it's intangible, right? Most of the softwares that we work with, the apps and all, these are just bytes. And how do we translate that to an actual impact on the planet, on anything that we have here, right? On resources, on concrete stuff. That's kind of difficult. So most of the people, they would say, well, it should be negligible, right? Because it's immaterial. We're going to see if it's true or not. Another sentence that we have heard also is that when we talk about Green IT, the priority is to reduce our power consumption. You might have heard this, right? Reduce our carbon footprint, and in order to do that, reduce the power that we will need in order to run our services. We'll see if it still holds true after this presentation. What we hear as well, and you can hear that everywhere, is that people will tend to tell you, oh, we have data centers and they're very big. We have the cloud, we have everything like that. And it's getting not sustainable anymore because the environmental footprint is actually very critical. Some people will say that as well. We are going to see if that still holds true as well. Just a disclaimer. Yep, just slightly. We are going to give you some numbers as well, but we are going also to maybe convince you that that might not be the case, right? So we're going to see all that. And for that, we are going to get on the green train first. This first part will be held by Tim, if he can come back because he just got disconnected. That's the problem of live session. So for this first part, Tim is going to explain to you all the different things that we have to look at, why businesses want to be more sustainable, and also how we can get there. So we're going to take some examples with very known businesses that you can relate to. We're going to see what their approaches are. And last but not least, we are going to see what methods we can follow in order to, well, align with them. Okay, thanks, Tim, for coming back. You okay? All right, Tim, the floor is yours. Let me remove myself. See you later.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for that. Hello, everybody. So sorry for the small technical glitch. So I will present you a very high level of green on the green, how to go in the green trend. So let's start with why change IT habits. Why does the top organization take the risk and invest in new approaches? Why big companies want to change? So the first one I would like to bring you is Facebook. So why Facebook is working on their data center, why they are trying to improve everything to work with a green environment. Today, the data center in Facebook are 100% renewable energy. They are trying to work with 80% more water efficiency compared to average data center. They use machine learning to optimize their performance. They also use circular thinking to try to cut the e-waste. So this is a big actor that is trying to cut a lot of the e-waste and technology. So the second one I can talk about is Walmart. Walmart is working on people. They provide some open source technology initially to work on their Black Friday sales, but they put to the community to help people to optimize the network and infrastructure. The next one is Google. Google working on circular economy. And in 2016, the figures that they share with us is 22% of components to upgrade their machine were refurbished. They have a target to reach zero carbon emission by 2030. And the last one, as an example, will be Microsoft. Microsoft is using underwater data center. What is the impact of this? They don't need buildings, they don't need cooling system. So with this set of company, you can see that big actor, big name are trying to invest on environment, and they are taking to use new way to improve and to share with the communities. I would like to show you a quick example also is some company like Facebook and Gmail, as you can see on the screen, are using light version. So as you can see on the screen, that Facebook has a lot of users in Brazil, in India, using this live version. What is this advantage? There is an advantage for end user that they can connect even if they have low connectivity. They can connect with their phone and they can use less data, mean use less money, and be able to access their solution. On this, there is also a demand, and when Facebook stop using the light version, there was some people complaining and say, "Give it back the light version." So I press a bit too fast for the next screen. So greenwashing. Let's go to the greenwashing, and is it a necessity or the luxury? So what we know that there is an environment impact, like on the climate, on the biodiversity, on the resources. So we know that there is some real impact. On if I have to talk about user device, today most of the devices are user mobile. Data center are really a minority of the equipment. User devices are likely to increase a lot since a while. So let's now talk about sustainable business development and the 3 Ps. So the 3 Ps are really a very important metrics that we are using to meet the present need and to secure the future. The original idea was to encourage businesses to manage a wider economy, social and environmental impact of their operation. So the first indicator of the 3 P is the planet. So the planet is help us to preserve the ecosystem, the biodiversity. So really tackle the few different crises. The next one will be the people. So address the people need, so the safety and the diversity. In this big box, we have different aspects that we try. So it's the fair trade, the employee welfare, the children will work, and we try to address the positive and negative impact on the stakeholder. And the last one is the profit. So the profit is to design sustainable production and consumption patterns. Is we are tackling this the cost revenue, the growth, and every few different elements that help to the company to grow. Okay. So right now, when we talk about sustainable development, we have the first element, which is the society, the people, and the second element that will be the economy. When we have these two different elements coming together, this is equitable. This is right now where most of the actors are. They are in this element, but we are not talking about sustainable economy yet. There is something missing. There is one big element missing, and the ecology is a part missing today for most of the environment, or most of the companies that we're talking about. When we are talking about ecology and society, we are talking about livable solution. When we are talking about ecology and economy, we are talking about viable technology. And when we reach the target of the three together, we are talking about sustainable. And this sustainable part is the target of many companies. Many companies are trying to reach this target. We are not there yet. So now let's go for some quick definition. So Green IT is a continuous improvement approach, and for us at Zenika, is something that talks us a lot, because Zenika is an anagram at Kaizen, and we really believe on this continuous improvement. So what is it? It controls these three P's: the environmental, social, and economic footprint of IT. And this is the global picture, a big group. And we have to put in opposition or in parallel with IT for Green, which is something totally different, slightly different. IT for Green focus only on the footprint of IT user and not on the global picture. And the last word that I would like to, definition that I would like to give will be on a digital sobriety. So is mindful and responsible usage of the IT. So example of low tech. And Adrien will share a bit more with you about it in the second part of the talk. So now let's go a bit more on IT and try to talk about it. How can you measure the impact of a software? Because it's intangible. So the first answer that I can give you, it's for a software, you have a device, you use a device, and this device is using energy and electricity. So this is the first part of the impact. The second part is people are developing the software. So these people developing the software are going to an office, they are using laptops, they are using transportation, and this part is also a big impact. And for some niche machine, for niche software, there is a big impact on it. For some software, they also give a device, they also give a support, and this is also coming. All this kind of thing are touching it. So now, if I would like to analyze the digital impact, as you can see on the screen, and I'm sure many of you have already heard and understand, like, oh, data center are the bad guys. Data center is consuming a lot of energy. And a lot of green bashing and greenwashing on data center. As you can see on this chart, on this table, data center, in fact, are not the biggest impact on the digital impact. It's even quite low. because the main reason is data center are really optimized. We see some example at the beginning with Microsoft, with Google, Facebook, with Google. All of them are trying to improve, use machine learning, water to cooling. So there is a lot of things, and you can see that the biggest issue is the device, the user device, and we know that there is a lot of increment of user device. There are 1 million new connected users per day, and most of the users use mobile device. So the traffic increase, and so the data transfer increase. So right now, I will share a bit of information about the digital impact ratio. I will compare mostly with the French because this is the figure that I present and I have today. So in the digital, virtual world represents 7 continents, 2 to 3 times the size of France for some impact, or even 5 times if we consider other impact. You can see that on the screen, and I won't go in all the features, but it's almost 4% of greenhouse gas emissions are done by virtual world. 5.5% of electricity consumption. So the electricity consumption is something a bit tricky because energy consumption is not ecological indicator. It depends on how the energy produced. It's in fact a complex matter. If we take the example like in Germany, they are using coal mine to produce energy and electricity, and there is much more greenhouse gas. So everything is slightly different and based on what we do. So on the digital impact on the infrastructure, so we just saw that we don't know where we are going. We still don't know where we are going. We are getting more measure, we are getting more information. We know in the world that there's 7 million servers, 1.5 billion network, there's 34 billion user equipment, and this is 4% of the global emission. End user equipment produce 63% of the global greenhouse effect. So, and this is produced mostly during the equipment manufacturing. I will come back a bit later on it to show some chart about that. On the e-waste, we know that there is a lot of e-waste produced from at all the stage of the life of the product, mostly on the pre-manufacturing and on the end of life. And 70% is trafficked by mafia. So only most of them are dumped in illegal area, and this is a big issue currently. We won't talk too much about it during this talk because it will give you an overview, but we may come back to you with a specific talk about this e-waste. We also need to talk about the obsolescence of equipment, the 5G, and the depletion of need of abiotic resource. So this is like the resource that we cannot recycle. And currently we are talking about the remote effect and long-lasting impact of our IT habit. And we know so far that this impact is more compared to 2010, but we still don't have enough data. If I want to talk a bit about things that improve, because we are saying that we are a bit like it's a bit worrying us to see like this. We are not bad. There is some improvement. There is some cloud and server-side optimization initiative, and thanks to this optimization, we have less zombie server. Zombie server right now I consider like 30% of data center. So to reduce this is a great work. There is more mutualization and multi-tenancy. So right now the issue for will be more on the front-end side of things. So let's talk a bit about the rebound effect. As you can see on this map, we have a different impact. All these impacts are linked together You have the climate crisis, the chemical pollution. Climate crisis, you can see it's red, but not as bad as biodiversity loss, nitrogen cycle. You are already aware of most of things, like less people, less fauna and flora are getting less. And there was a try in 2009 to show this kind of chart, and right now they are all linked. We know that the deforestation linked to biodiversity loss. Right now, the top priority and the place that we already reach the boundary is biodiversity and nitrogen cycle. Climate crisis, we are going there. So we still have time to do something. But it can move very fast because we don't know what we are doing. We don't know how it's going to move. When I say we don't know what it's doing, we don't know what is going to move. There is a new manufactured device like IoT. People are using much more IoT. We have connected washing machine. We have connected fridge. We have all this IoT button. If people start using it more and more, we don't know what will be the impact. We don't know how it's going to work. And if people start adopting it, there will be more data transfer and more traffic. The mobile device, we are afraid of fear of missing out. Marketing, like Apple is always coming with a new device and hey guys, you need to use it. We are falling for this kind of marketing, and because of that, we have much more device and much more green impact. And I have a fun example of that. I had a very old iPad that I bought almost when iPad came out, like one of the first version. And lately I registered on Udemy, and I would like to watch my class on my old iPad. I do the right setup. I took it back for my daughter because they were using it for their own use, and I cannot log in on Udemy with my old device. My device is not supported anymore by Udemy. It's not supported by iOS this version, and I cannot it. And because of this, because of this upgrade of version, I'm not able, and my device that is working perfectly fine, that I can use, the battery is well, I cannot use for most of the thing, and it will be gone. You can see that people a bit, you are spending much more time on your phone right now. You are spending much more time that you were spending in 5 or 10 years ago. A laptop, if some people got like a Windows 95 or Windows 98, this kind of laptop you can use for many years. You can replace components. And now the new laptop, the new device is 2-3 years, and after we can throw them away and they are not reliable. So I would like to talk a bit now with the resource rarity and take a small example of copper. So copper demand, in the 30s, we were using 55 tons to extract 1 ton of copper. Now we need 125, which is more than double. This impact is we need more time to extract it. We need more. There is more pollution with the mercury pollution, the water pollution, and this is just one of the items that we use a lot in cell phone, for example. That is one. What about items that we can only find in some African or Chinese mine? There will be a big impact on that. And the price of our device, the price of our item will increase a lot because of this resource depletion. So I promised you slightly earlier in the presentation that I would talk about manufacturing and show you some data about the life cycle assessment. And what is obvious with this mention 4, that the pre-manufacturing is the biggest impact. Extracting the resource, extracting the resource to build the item is the thing that costs much. A lot of people think, oh, yes, if I use less my device, I will have a big impact. You have an impact, but this impact is negligible. There is a lot of people telling us, oh, I need to delete my email because I use that parts. I use energy, I use air. In fact, the email impact, delete your email, is quite negligible. It's not the biggest impact. The biggest impact will be stop buying your stop changing device, try to not use new device. And this will be on the circular economy, and we can also talk a lot about circular economy. One of the big and takeaway that I would like you to have is awareness and humility. People here in Singapore and all over the world are not that aware and humble about green IT and digital IT. There is a lot of work that we need to do on education, especially here in Singapore, that we can see that people are not used to recycling. We can see that battery, to change a battery in Singapore is quite difficult. If you want to throw away your batteries, you will have challenge to find some place to throw. So, but now let's go a bit more on the specificity IT. The question that we can ask ourselves is how we can develop software products that can be more efficient, less resource hungry, and that can still perform for users. And this is one of the things that we have tried in Zenika. We are trying also to do our first thing in Singapore. We could develop a website to say like how we will be able to do it, to have using less energy, less technology, and most important, less people should be able to find the information quite fast and not using it much. And just connect, get the information, disconnect. Is the opposite approach like that is using for most of the big software and bigger software company like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They are trying to have you click and click again. And this is something that we are trying differently. The other kind of question we can ask ourselves is how can we contribute to electronic waste reduction while maintaining fair and strong digital economy? How we can make sure that we create a solution to answer people's needs without accelerating resource depletion. Does this uncertainty actually impact my product, my service, my organization, my relative? So it's really in the overall picture, like you need to ask the question yourself when you start developing, when you start doing something, how I can do this the best, how I not overthink and create the best version only working on the last device, how I can keep at it, like I was mentioning at the beginning, the live version of Facebook can be a great version, good work, and can bring a lot of value for people. And we don't need to have the fastest thing. And when we can make it work on 2G, why are we going on 5G? So this is a question that you need to think and answer. So you will ask me like, is green IT only a defensive approach? And of course not. Green IT is not a defensive approach. We have a lot of things. We have a lot of work that we can do. And we can talk about low tech. We can talk about like, we have things to do. We have weapons, and we can get some powerful gain to have a positive impact on business. So the kind of impact is on the energy equipment durability. If we create some solutions that use less battery, less energy, we'll be able to bring something. We have cost and performance for equipment. We have the branding. And on the branding, there's something important that I would like to share with you. Right now, 65% of people say they want to buy brands that are following green IT, green purpose, and sustainable. But if you see the fact, is only 26% that are doing it. So we don't. The branding and the marketing is not. The greenwashing is not useful for marketing. We can also improve social inclusion by focusing on accessibility and availability of service for persons with handicap, persons without proper training, digital illiteracy, population with limited access to internet. And again, we are going to build the right solution for the right people, adapting to the environment, adapting to the change of device, the education, and so on. And one of the really takeaway is we need to build awareness. We need to have people to be aware of that, of green IT. So now I will hand over to Adrien to talk a bit more about eco design. But before that, if you have any question or anyone thing you want to ask, we can take a small break now. Adrian, you're on mute.
Right. So I was in mute. All right, should be fine now. So thank you for this with Tim. All right, thanks Tim. Removing you. Say bye. Right. So thank you very much. We have presented you a lot of numbers, right? And it can be a bit overwhelming, I guess. You might say that, it can look a bit too late, to have the biggest impact on IT in general, in order to make things better, to improve things out there. It's true that if we look at all the numbers and we only shared with you just a subset of them, it might be a bit terrifying, but nothing is ever too late. We can change, we can slow down some things, we can avoid some rebound effects as well. It's never too late. How do we do that? How do we do that with software, right? Because we showed you that the most impact is actually on the hardware side. And Zenika, we're a software company, so might be a discrepancy here. You might ask yourself, how can I help when I work in software companies and my job is just writing code? So we're going to see that. We're going to see that there is actually a tight, bound between, tight link between co-design between software and between hardware. And this is how we can have a bigger impact. So let's start. And yep, let me start. Is it working? All right, that's the problem with live sessions, right? So how do we do things first? When we work on projects, right, we have software projects, we have products that we want to get out there. When we start creating product during the inception phase, we usually do not ask ourselves, how are we going to recycle that product when it's ending? Especially for softwares, right? Have you ever heard that during meetings? Usually no, right? So that's the first thing that we have to assess first. Changing our habits when we develop products would be first to talk about the life cycle of our products. So it's true that we want to know how our products can have an impact on the people, on our business, in the market and all. And this is legit. I mean, we still need to do that. One thing that we do not do, and maybe we should start doing progressively in order to have more of an eco-design approach, is to talk about life cycle assessments. These life cycle assessments, we are going to look at different things, mainly on the hardware part. And this is a change of mindset, right? When you are going to talk about your product, you're also going to talk about the needed infrastructure to run your product. So what is necessary to run your product? Do you need 5G? Are you going to ask for people to build the 5G towers because you need it for your product? Do you need a very big computing power on server side? Do you need bigger screens? Because this has an impact, right? You might not know this, but in a mobile device, a lot of rare materials go into the screen. If you buy your big 4K screen as well, it's actually a lot. It's very impactful on the planet because a lot of very rare materials that you can only find in certain regions of the world are used for this. So the idea of eco-design is, okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we need to run our softwares. If you start designing an application that can work with just small screens, you are producing less impact on the ecosystem rather than producing an application that can only work on a desktop screen or that needs HD, for example. Okay, so here are these things. Of course, we're not going to talk about the kinds of equipment that you could have in your house. Just to let you know, something for food for thought for you. When you buy a retro projector, so if you have a projector, just like in the movies, right, in the movie theaters, if you buy that, you actually have less of an impact rather than big screens. The LCD screens are the ones that have, that contribute to the resource depletion. So just be mindful about it. So we have to talk about manufacturing. We have to talk about it because we need these devices. We need hardware in order to run software. So once we talk about these things, once they get, once it gets a habit to be a habit, we start thinking further. We start thinking about how we can lower our footprint from the software perspective. Okay, so we need to look at the product use. How often are my users going to use my product? Do I need to shut down my services sometimes just to make sure that my users do not use the service? Is it something that I need to do in order to lower my footprint? And what about the end of life? What's going to happen to my hardwares, to my servers, to everything that needs to run my product once my product is finished? I'm pretty sure you haven't really thought that way, right? So most of the time it will be reused, right? Because user devices are reused to access multiple kinds of services. So that might not be a concern for these kind of things. But talk about servers. What about your hardware at home and all? You know that still a lot of companies still run their services on-premise, and that a lot of the servers are zombie servers. That's what Tim told you earlier. We have something like 30%. That's quite huge. It's still better than before, and especially with the rise of the cloud, but it's still a lot. Okay, so let's move a bit further, because this is a bit theoretical for now. Right. Because LCAs, it's true that they're nice, and we should have them more often during inception phase, but they're very complex and they're very costly to put in place. So except if you have an organization that really wants strategically to go for full green, I don't know, in 2030. Let's say that they want to have a zero carbon footprint, and let's say that it's in their DNA that they want to be really green. Yes, maybe they will spend that much money in order to have LCAs everywhere and be aware of the impact that they have on the planet, right? But usually that's not really the case. So LCAs, we have them because they identify the impact of a company's product, a service, a whole departments and all. Okay, but usually we'll try to have a simplified assessment, because otherwise you have something like more than 15 different things to look at. Here you can look at just the impactful ones. So GWP, the global warming potential. Are you contributing to greenhouse gases? Of course, this is very difficult to assess because it depends where you are running your services, in which data center, where is this data center, how is it powered? All of this will influence that. Then abiotic depletion potential, so that's the ADP. So how are you going to contribute to lessen the the manufacturing that is required to run your products, right? So these things you can also assess it. You can also assess PED and WD, water depletion. I will tell you a bit more about it just in a moment. Okay. Water depletion, how do you manage it? You need water every time. You need water to actually, cut the sum of for some chemical reactions in order to extract minerals as well. You need water every time at every step of manufacturing. You need water when you find gold as well. You know that back then, and it's still the case, when you need to extract gold from mineral, and gold is used for most electronics devices, you need to actually use mercury, and these compounds, these chemicals, they end up in water, and this water is wasted. You can't use it anymore. You need to filter it out. You need to, treat it, process it afterwards. So you can't use that water anymore, and it's being rejected. So Water depletion is actually a big topic as well, because you need tons of water to produce IT equipment as well. All of this, of course, is not exact science, because it depends on what you are looking at, what are the numbers that you look at. If you have all the numbers as well, some of them you are going to get from statistical models. But what is interesting is when you have an LCA, once you start with an LCA and you know what you are measuring, you can compare it to another LCA. And this is how you start a virtuous cycle, by actually looking at, can I do it a bit better? Can I do it like they do? Am I in the same context? They have this LCA, who's making a good impact, and they're improving the LCA. Can we start doing the same? And what do they do to reach that? So LCAs are good for basis, for baselines that you can reuse afterwards. So the first steps. Of course, I just said that LCAs are very costly and all, and by state of the art, if you can still do it, this is how we conduct a green IT eco-design approach. So when you have the money, when you have the time, when you start from scratch and you're really motivated, first you have to identify what you want to audit for your LCA. You can audit many different things. Your CIO habits, the architecture, the data centers that will be involved in your projects, in your teams, the software business unit. So everything that isn't here in terms of equipment, software, everything that is here to support your business, right? Then you need to carry out the actual LCA. You need to also compare it with existing profiles for each audited items. So you look at your data centers. Okay, what is the consumption of that? Let's look at other data centers. Do they produce less or more greenhouse gases? What is the difference? And you start comparing as well. And it does sound a bit like, data analytics and big data at this point. That's why it's a bit tricky, because you need experts in that area as well. So this is where you can identify the areas of progress, the sources of impact, and you can start acting on them. Then the third step is to define an action plan. For that, of course, you need business objectives, because everything that we do, remember with the 3P, we have to take into account the business, the profit that we want to have. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. If you're only doing these things for the people and for the ecology part, you're not sustainable. That's not going to last that long, your initiatives, because you're not making profit out of it. We need to find a balance between all this. So let's realign the action plan with the business objectives. How is it going to help you? What are the benefits that we can get out of it? You need to work on it. Then part of the company, the products, the values, all this, when it's aligned, then you got a plan and you put it in place, right? But for that, you need sponsorship. You need to support the transformation, right? You can't just do it on your own. We've seen a lot of green IT initiatives actually fail because they went from engineering to nothing. Basically, the engineers were like, oh, we should do this, we should do that, it's going to have an impact. At some point, pressure from business, not any sponsoring, and they will just tell you, we need time to market, we need to get that out there, forget about it. They are missing a point here. If you can implement a green IT approach, if you can involve the stakeholders, and if you get sponsorship on that, the gains that you can have at the end of the road, once you deploy the plan and everything, that's going to help your business, the profit, the sustainability of it. You are going to use less resources, you are going to be lighter, you are going to propose a service that is in line with the company's values, with what people expect as well from you. So all of this is actually very good for the brand, for the business sustainability, for your products as well, because they will become more maintainable, because leaner as well, they're going to be lighter. So you got a lot of very good things, a lot of very good outcomes that you can benefit from. And that's why involving stakeholders is the key to that. You need to be able to sell that to them, right? The fifth step is to define KPIs. It's good, we have the plan, we got it out there. Now we need to measure the outputs as well, not just the outcomes. Outcomes can be measured and people are happier and you got a lot of things, but we need to define concrete KPIs in order to see how we can even go further, how we can improve ourselves, right? We need also to make it more visible. Once we have agreed, we have sponsorship and all, we have done this at a small scale, because all of this that I'm talking about, it's not at an organization level, right? You should start it on a project or something like that. But once we started it and we got the KPIs here that were in place, and we got some measures, some metrics, and we got the plan, we can just have some reporting on it and say, look, this is what we got. We improved this area, and that area, and we should continue that way. And we're going to be even more impactful, right? So state of the art, when you look at how to have an eco-design approach, this is how it is. Of course, as I just said, very difficult to get, right? So there's a lot of pitfalls here. One of the first thing I told you is that you need to gather a lot of data and to process it. That's a lot, right? You got so much data, it's expensive to store, you have to reassess it, you need to calculate the models as well. For that, you need to look at things that you might not be very good at. You need to manipulate the concepts of greenhouse gases, resource depletion, and all. It's a bit difficult, right? And also, you need to compare. How do you compare if you don't have the data from others? How do you compare when you don't have a full community that is doing that as well? In France, it's easier, because in France, we're starting to have data. We have a collective. We have people contributing. We have forums. We can share with the experts. And they give us their insights, they give us their experiences on the field, and we can compare things like that. In different parts of the world, it's a bit more difficult. So you see that starting an eco-design approach, it's actually quite tough if we want to be, in the state-of-the-art field area. So that's why we are proposing alternatives for that, right? You don't have the data, it costs too much. Can we start with guidelines? Yes. So I'm answering my own question, sorry. No teasers and no suspense on this. But the idea is, yes, you can. You don't need everything to be perfect at first, right? And let's start with eco-design as a lean methodology that we can apply everywhere, okay? So what I'm going to talk about here, let's forget about the theory. Let's forget about things that are state-of-the-art, and you're going to say, yes, Adrian, that's good, but that's your own thing, right? We are never going to use that anymore. Let's talk pragmatically of what we can do. So eco-design with a lean approach. We start first by setting objectives, right? An example of impactful objectives. We want to divide by, I don't know, let's say 2 or 3, the number of required servers over the next 5 years, right? I have that many number of servers in my organization or for my project. I want to divide them by this number. That's a good impactful objective. I can start with that, right? Or I can say, because we can also, change them. I want to divide by that number of percentage the amount of transmitted data over the next 5 years. Why is this important? That I worry about the data transfers, right? You might not know this, but we have built, I think, something like 10 million new antennas over the world in the past decade. I mean, that's crazy, right? The idea for that is that more people tend to connect to the internet, and they want to have full access everywhere, right? In the subway, near MRT here, they want to have access every time. And now we're talking about 5G, but 80% of the usage of 5G today, we are pretty sure is going to be for streaming videos. What's the point? I mean, you can download it at home with Wi-Fi, and you'll have a very small footprint, because then it's wired and you just need a router here. You don't need to build a whole antenna for that. You don't need 4G, you don't need all this, and that's actually more impactful on the planet. So worrying about the amount of data that you transfer, it's actually helping the mindset that, we do not need new materials. We do not need to manufacture new antennas that will support protocols for faster and really, big bandwidth kind of thing, meaning that we don't need all that power to transfer data over the network. We don't need 5G, basically. Okay, we don't even need 4G. No, we talked to other people recently for their IoT projects. Most people will tell you 5G is great for IoT. Yes, in certain cases, I would say. Yeah, it's great. If you really need fast data transfer and you have a lot of captors and all, yeah, that's cool. Most of the IoT projects today, you only need 2G. You only need 2G. You can gather as much data as you want with 2Gs with some, some devices here and there, and then you gather all that and you plug that to your Wi-Fi, and that's it. I mean, and your footprint is ridiculous, and you don't need bigger antennas and all. When people tell you you need 5G for some, countries like in Africa and some poor countries and all, in order to help them, no, yeah, let's start maybe with 2Gs. That's going to be fine. I mean, yes, 5G is even better, but do you really need that in all cases? So the idea, when you say that I'm going to transfer less data over the network, if my website is lighter, if I don't need, if I can cache on my user device and all, that's going to have a big impact on that. Remember, 10 millions of new antennas. Okay. We have a question. In an application where real-time data information, time critical, is the main product, how do we push the reduction in the amount of data transfer? Okay, let me just add this to the chat so that everyone sees it. Okay. So the idea for that, of course, if your product is the real-time data, you can't just say, I'm going to stop that, right? But you have to look at different things. Throttling, for example, do you really need real-time, or can you wait maybe every 5 seconds? Can you package the data? Can you piggyback on some requests as well? You know, real-time says everything and nothing. You have real-time with server push. When something happens in the background in the server, then you push it to the devices. That's real-time. You also got piggyback. So when you have a request from a user because they want to refresh something, then an update in the background will also piggyback on that response and come back. You have throttling. You have long polling. The user can query that every 5-10 seconds, a bit more. So you have to assess that first at the conception phase. During the inception of your product, you can ask yourself, do I really need real time? And we're going to play a game every time when we are going to talk about eco design in depth after setting the objectives. You're going to see that our best game, our favorite game, is going to be, do I really need it? Okay, we're going to see that. But if you really need it, if you need real time, then there are multiple ways to optimize that. Be careful about gzipping compression, right? You need to compress your data. Be sure that you can do that. Also, be linear. Have some patterns implemented, such as backend for frontend or frontend for backend. I forgot the other way around, but basically have an edge service that your devices can connect to, yet can also process the data that you will need and just give you exactly what you need and not all the noise around it. No timestamps, no other things that you don't need, actually, because you only need certain pieces of data to be displayed. So, for example, if your real-time transfer is just on the update on the price, just send the price. Do not send anything else. Do not send a timestamp, who it comes from, and redundant information, right? Be linear. And if you can optimize that, you're actually helping, right? I hope it was okay for that part. I'm going to talk about this a bit further, all right? So let's move. Okay, just a moment. I need to set that up. All right. Another kind of objectives that we can aim is this one: augment by a certain percentage the lifespan of user equipment over the next 5 years. If you think about it, how many of the current applications that you run on your devices can still run on an iPhone 1? How many of them can still work on 2G, on 3G? You know, when I first started, not first started, right? When I worked here a long time back for a bank in Singapore, and I can't talk about, well, I can't say the name of the bank, but I worked for this bank as a consultant, and I was a bit taken aback because I was younger, and they told me, your solution, we need to find a way so that our customers in Africa with only 10 Mbps connections can access the services. And most of the time, of course, you might think about a big fat client that can do a lot of things on a big device and then connect it to the network and do a slow data transfer maybe over the night or something like that. And that's the time where I said, okay, they have old equipment, they need to reuse that, and they can't just move to the newer ones, they can't move to newer network equipments, they can't move to newer user devices. We have to work with what we have. I also talked recently 1 or 2 years back with people working in South Africa, and they told me themselves, they said, your approach, because I was giving a talk on web components and things that are closer to the browser, they told me your approach is actually what we need in Africa. We can't just use React. We can't just use Vue and all. The whole world is using these, but us, we can't do that because most of our customers, more than 50% of them, are still using devices that only run browsers that are not that performant. They still support web components, but we don't have enough RAM. We don't have enough CPU power to run React, to run all these things. So we need to be very close to the browser itself, right? So this is how we can influence that. Now let's move away from the objectives and concrete objectives that can really, pull us towards having an eco-design approach. And let's talk about the foundations of eco-design. So we have to worry about the infrastructure first. That's the first thing, right? We can't talk about eco-design in general if we don't have in mind that it runs on hardware. So let's worry about infrastructure. We want to worry about how we can craft softwares, not just produce features out there, because otherwise we only talk about profit. You remember the 3 Ps. We only talk about profit. We need to talk about profit, planet, and people. Okay, and that's where craft is here, because craft has a very, very heavy focus on people. We'll see how it can contribute to the planet. Then for the planet itself, we can talk about low-tech. Low-tech is this thing where, by definition, when you have a low-tech approach, it's the opposite of high-tech, meaning that high-tech is all these fancy stuff that you can use to solve your issues, but sometimes you have alternatives that will use less infrastructure, that you will use less resources and all. So low-tech is this thing where you can, for example, use a form just on paper and just one sheet of paper instead of having an app for everything. You can also use, I'm not sure what, but another kind of device. Oh yeah, I have this example, sorry. You know that they were trying to track cancer with big data and with machine learning and everything. And for a certain type of cancer, they found out that training dogs was actually more efficient and much less expensive and less data consuming and having a better impact on the planet. Using dogs was much better than using a machine learning algorithm that had some results, some good results from Google, if I remember correctly. Actually, the dog was much better. So this is a low-tech solution, right? The dog is a low-tech solution on its own. You can train a dog finding these things, except of building this whole thing about ML and all. I mean, that's pretty cool for the technology of it, but what's the point? So low-tech as a default choice can be also very good for that. We need accessible UI and UX because we need to involve people. We need to. You might know that digital illiteracy is actually plaguing a lot of regions in the world. Some people do not really know how to manipulate IT. That's okay. We need to include them. No, I can't be specific on breed of the dog, but I can look it up for you, Jean. Sorry. So for the accessible UI and UX, what you want is for people to spend less time on your applications, right? You want them to come in to get exactly what they need, maybe with 3 clicks, that's all, and then get out, right? So that's why you need to optimize this as well. Remember, we want to make the user devices, we want the batteries to last longer. We want them to, be able to use a lot of things, and we don't want them to, after 2 years, to just be thrown away, right? So that's how you can do it with good UI UX as well. And we talk about a new ROI for each phase of software development lifecycle. I've seen a lot of resumes where people say, oh, I'm an expert in software development lifecycle. I don't know if it's a trend recently, but I've been receiving a lot of resumes where people say, I am really knowledgeable in SDLC. I didn't even know that it was something, to be honest. When I talk about ROI in SDLC, I find that you need to worry about 3 things. ROI stands for, that's my new definition, reuse. What do you reuse in your software development lifecycle? What kind of competencies do you reuse? What kind of behavior, what kind of good knowledge do you reuse and you take in, right? O is for optimize. What do you want to optimize? What is it that you want to get, right, in there? What can you optimize compared to other metrics that you have? And the I is for innovation. How can you think out of the box in order to find new ways to improve your product in line with the 3 Ps always, right? So when you talk about SDLC today, when you want to be really an expert in SDLC, I would say, do you think about ROI in the first place? Do you try to really work on the product, or are you just here to deliver features? Because if you're just here to deliver features, you haven't even started to think about the end of your product lifecycle. So you're not really looking at the full lifecycle. You're just worrying about how can I put features out there, right? So ROI should be really in your mind. Okay, recycle, optimize, innovate. Okay, I hope it's not too overwhelming. We still got a few things to cover. So let's worry about the overview, and then we are going to deep dive more on the steps, and we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. That's okay. So overview, recap. Eco-design must consider the service wholly. We can't just look at code. We can't just look at something that is intangible. We have to worry about the infrastructure it's working, running on. We have to worry about manufacturing of these things. So when you choose your cloud provider, maybe you should start worrying about how they actually design their data centers. How are the data centers powered as well? You might know that there is a Google data center, for example, in Singapore. Google is very transparent about it. They say, if you want a data center that runs on green energy, maybe you should choose the one that is in the western coast of US. Maybe you should not choose that one, because we don't have a full control on the energy in Singapore, where it comes from, right? Because we buy power from the surrounding countries. But they did say, okay, if you want to improve the latency, you can use that. So it becomes architecture work to make big, impactful decisions on where you're going to host your data and your services, right? So manufacturing is something to take into account. Your usages as well, if you are going to use these servers a lot or not. Maybe shutting down the servers once in a while, maybe 3 hours per day during nighttime, or maybe once a week or things like that. Maybe it's helpful. And maybe you can also contribute to a new way of using services. Maybe you can say that, on Thursdays, because usually we don't have that many customers, we are going to shut down our services for at least 6 hours. And during 6 hours, no, you won't need us. Okay, maybe it's a possibility. I'm not saying that everybody should do that. I'm just saying that we have to think about it. I don't know if you've seen the movie from Steven Spielberg with the video games and all, and at the end, well, the good guys win and all. And it's a big video game. Everyone is addicted to it. And one of the big things that they said is, we're going to shut down the game 1 day per week. 1 day per week, the game is not functioning, and people were, of course, very upset with the decision. But in the end, people get used to it. We have to change our habits like that, right? So that's how we change the usages, and that's how it has an impact on the infrastructure. We have to worry about end of life. Google is refurbishing components and all. That's something that we have to be worried about. Okay, we have to limit obsolescence. We already talked about it. Be careful about supporting not just the latest devices, but the former ones. We have to size the servers, the network bandwidth, adapt the amount of data that we transfer over the network. And we have to produce and maintain useful and necessary data, meaning that we got to stop with analytics gathering so much data on people that most of the time we are never using. I think something like only 20% of the data that we gather with Google Analytics and all are actually relevant and are used afterwards. 80% of them is rubbish, you don't use it. You might as well not gather it, because it's also personal information that should stay with the people. You should not be that intrusive, right? So, eco-design optimizes infrastructure. That's the first thing. Next overview. Channel history is used at time spent. I told you about it with UI UX. We want to reduce time spent to book a train ticket, for example. So we have to properly identify the business needs. That's where UX is important. We have to optimize the user journeys. We have to do resources pooling. Maybe we can also share resources, share servers. That's where cloud is really nice. You can also maybe do peering with phones. If someone has already gathered elements, maybe they can share it with Bluetooth with their neighbors, something like that. So you can have things like that, right? Thinking outside the digital box and always recycle. Okay, so eco-design optimizes the user experience, and the other way around, UX is actually helping us having an eco-design approach. So they pair well together. But how do I apply this concretely? Because I keep talking about objectives, and we've seen the objectives, how we can be inspiring our peers. We've seen a bit of things on UX, UA, and all. So now let's look at a concrete approach, okay? And we're going to see a step-by-step approach. On all the SDLC phases, I love that word, sorry, I'm a bit like a kid that has a new toy. So software lifecycle, we can see that we have all these things. We have requirements gathering, UI UX conception, architecture decisions, technology choices, development, build and integration, tests, usage in production, and monitoring. And of course, you also have decommission. I do not talk about it here, but I will talk about it later. This is software lifecycle, and that's huge, right? That's pretty complex. We got a lot of things to worry about. To be honest, only the four first ones, if we focus heavily on them, it can go a long way. Every decision that you take after these first four steps, is actually going to be less impactful. Of course, you can still have continuous improvement everywhere, so a Kaizen approach, but during the inception phase, so requirements gathering, UI UX, architecture, and technology choices, this is where you're going to have the most impact, the most powerful impact. All right. Inception. Let's pin it. So, tools, principles, and leverage. One of the main things about the inception phase, when you start gathering the requirements, when you talk about the vision and what you are going to propose as a product, you need to first think, do I really need it? You remember I told you that, right? Is there an alternative, a low-tech alternative to my digital solution? And can I be supporting that with my business, right? I may be a tech company, but if I can find a way to provide a service that is using low-tech, maybe just with a bit of IT, but with a lot of social interaction of people, maybe that's better than just proposing an app, right? So think about it as well. What is my feature life cycle? How often is my service going to be used? If you have an onboarding app, for example, and you know that this app is not going to last more than 1 year because afterwards you think about another way of onboarding people, why do you need an app in the first place? Because that app is going to last 1 year only. Think about the sustainability or durability. Well, how long your feature is going to last. That's the first thing. Then we want to talk about the social and the business impact mapping. So one thing that I love doing when I go to my customers is do impact mappings. Reassess where the business can have the best impact. What features need to get out there in order to help people and customers in the best way. And will reflect well on the brand and on the product, right? When you have product managers today, and it's kind of a new field, right? Product management. And one of my best friends here in Singapore is actually a product manager. So we tended to share a while before COVID. So the idea of product management is to produce value, is to make sure that we have value with everything that we deliver, right? We are not just here to get money. We are here to be impactful on the life of others, on our customers, and also with our product line. It needs to be aligned with a bigger picture. So do we target the correct thing here in the region, globally? What is our product outreach? We need to assess that in the first place. And it's not the same, right? If you need it globally, then you will need an infrastructure that can support this globally. If you need to deploy your product only for a regional market, then you do not need that infrastructure, right? Data handling as well. Do you need to store a lot of data, and for how long? I mean, I'm pretty sure that you have stored data that is already 10 years old. Do you really look at them? I mean, for compliance needs and all, yes, I understand that you will need that. Most of the time, if you think that you're going to need it later, 90% of the time you're wrong, you're never going to do it. Okay. Should we have a software for everything? I would say no. I would say that you have to assess that, and that's during requirements gathering, right? The biggest impact that you can have once you start thinking about your product, if you say that, no, I don't need a software for the whole thing, maybe I need a software for just parts of it, that can go a long way, to be honest. Phase 2, solutioning. How can we have an impact with eco-design? So the first thing is UI UX, right? And I'm pretty sure that I got some friends out there that are going to be very joyful that they have a big impact. So UI UX designers, they actually can help you enhance the user experience, have retention, make sure that people get faster to what they're here for. That's pretty cool. They can also implement responsive design. Responsive design is this thing that will, for each user interfaces, will adapt to the size of your screen. That's even better because if you remember correctly, I told you that smaller screens have less impact on resource depletion in the planet. So that's more sustainable in a way. It's better to design softwares for small screens rather than for desktops, to be honest. They can also optimize client-side services. I told you about scale infra and to make sure that all the elements that we push to devices, we do that when the device is needed. So maybe you need to shut down your servers when most people don't use their devices, for example, during the day or during the night. And also we need to optimize the data transfers. And then we need to have to choose technologies wisely, right? We need to work with sustainable languages, meaning that if you love the latest, I don't know, language out there that is out, I'm going to say something silly, but well, what is out there? What is trendy these days? Without saying anything too silly, well, I don't know. You're going to use the latest JavaScript framework that is very trendy and everybody loves it because it's cool. It's it's like a hipster stuff. And the problem is that this framework, maybe 2 years from now, nobody will use it anymore. Now, how do you sustain that? How do you make sure that you still get talent in order to maintain this? And if you don't get it, 90% of chances you're going to drop the project and you're going to restart from scratch. It's actually very heavy, actually, and you're not recycling that much. Okay, so be very careful about the languages that you choose, the frameworks that you choose. Focusing on standard paradigms, it can actually go a long way. Of course, if you also put in place knowledge management and knowledge transfer in your project development lifecycle, SDLC, that's going to go a long way as well. And I have this question all the time. If we use cloud, does this help? Does cloud help eco-design? Where do we have the most impact? If you remember what Tim presented, most of the impact is on the user devices because it's on manufacturing of these devices. We have 34 billion user devices out there, and we have only 70 million servers, only. To be honest, data centers and all, they do use a lot of power. You need also to build these big buildings, and you need to also use air conditioning to maintain a certain low temperature. So of course, there are energy war. They use a lot of energy. But we have focused so much in the past decade on data centers that today they are the most optimized parts of our infrastructure. We got circular economy, we got recycling, we got these new ways of managing data centers with air cooling and all, and that's pretty neat, everything that we do there. And most of the cloud data centers that are managed by Google, by Microsoft and all, they're doing a lot to be carbon zero footprint in 2030. So on this side, I would say, yes, it's helpful, but they're already quite optimized. If you want to have more impact, you have to worry about two things these days. Because one fast-growing element is the data transfer because of the network antennas I told you about. And the second one is the user devices. Okay, if you worry about these things, about user devices and data consumption, so the client side of things, you'll have actually more impact rather than focusing on the servers themselves where you have a lot of solutions to optimize things. Okay, let's worry about development now and see how developers, and I'm a developer myself, so I'm quite happy about it, we can have a bigger impact. So developers, we can worry about the machine sizing. When we are developers, we tend to use a lot of RAM, a lot of things and all, because we tend to say, oh, we're going to need all that. And most of the time, except if you run a machine learning algorithm on your computer, you don't need 16 or 32 gigs of RAM just to run, I don't know, an Eclipse, right? So let's be a bit humble about it. Of course, if we use Craft or XP programming practices, we want to leverage a lot peer programming to make sure that we have only one laptop open and running at a time for two people. It can also reduce consumption, right? Shared terminals is actually very helpful. So if we can encourage more programming and pair programming in order to be greener. That would be very nice. Okay, continuous deployment. We need to reduce the number of environments that we have in order to build our solutions. We also want to make sure that we don't spend too much time on our devices, so that most of the automated tasks, they can be delegated to computers. And we want to have computing pools. So for builds, integrations, and tests, that's where provisioning on environments with the cloud and things like that, it's actually very good for our initiatives. So the best code is minimalistic. Yes, that's a yes, a big yes. When you want to design and when you start coding something, the idea is that the smaller your code, the smaller the footprint, and the smaller the architecture, the better it is, because you are going just to fit what is necessary. If you over-engineer, if you start thinking, oh, I'm going to need this in the long term and all, 80% of the time you're not going to need it. It's Yagni, you ain't going to need it. That's one. You have three principles in craftsmanship. You have KISS, keep it simple and sustainable. That's a new definition from one of our green advocates. We have dry, don't repeat yourself. And we have Yagni, you ain't gonna need it. You are never going to need it. So if you're not going to need it, just start in. Just don't over-engineer. Don't use these frameworks and all that will provide you hundreds of features that will never end up in your final product. So yes, the best code is minimalistic. Start small, and maybe finish small. Maybe. Okay, the run phase. For the run phase, we have session habits assessment. So we need to analyze what our load is on our servers, how much CPU is used at which time, if we have a real number of users that we have to worry about at certain periods. All of this is going to help us scale the infrastructure. So if we can be smart enough to analyze all this and to use that for the elasticity of our computing pool, that's actually great. Can have a much better impact on the efficiency of the usage of the infrastructure. And of course, we can have a refactoring strategy when we see that we have opportunities to make things faster, or maybe to reuse some services for other things. That can have a very big impact. And we can only see that when we analyze the habits of the users. And you don't need Google Analytics for that. You can worry about other metrics, or you can just talk to people. That works out very well. You can just call them, hey, how is my service? Are you happy with that? Good old social things. Should you retrieve as many information as you can? The answer is no. I say this with empathy. I know how hard it can be if you don't have all the dashboards and all that can comfort you. Most of the time, you're not going to use the dashboard. So, end of life, something that we always forget about. What is going to be my cost for migration or decommission? When I'm done with my product, because I'm certainly going to be done at some point, well, what do I propose for the decommissioning? That should also be something that I propose as soon as possible. So I can say I will either partially or completely shut down, based on my metrics. Maybe I will just partially shut it down. Maybe it will be used for a subset of users. I can redirect some users to my legacy application because maybe it makes sense for them. Or maybe I will completely shut it down. I can also look at competencies recycling, meaning that, they worked a lot on this latest project on JavaScript. Let's worry about recycling that as well. Oh, they have very good skill in object-oriented programming. How can we leverage their knowledge of this paradigm for the new product? We have components recycling as well. If you have a design system, if you have something like that, if you have CSS and all, something that is low-tech and minimalistic, you have a lot of chances to actually reuse that. If it's too high tech, if it's Kafka, if it's IBM mainframe, if it's a WebSphere, everything that is high tech, it's very difficult to reuse it. But if you're minimalistic in your approach, most of the time, yeah, it's very easy to recycle everything that you've used in the project. Okay, log the experience and return analysis. You remember that we wanted an SDLC, an LCA, a lifecycle assessment in our state-of-the-art approach. If you can't have that, the next best thing is this. Have this approach, it's very concrete, okay? You can deploy that, and you can just log the experience and say that every step of the way, just by following these rules and these steps, and I will share the slides with you, you can say, okay, I gained that. I actually gain that amount of time. I gain 3 days working on one laptop instead of 2 persons working on 5 laptops at the same time, something like that. So you can measure all this, and you can measure the impact. Once you have all this, you can just have a reporting, and you can compare it. If you have 2, 3, 4 different teams doing that, then you can start comparing, and you can start comparing your impact. And afterwards, when you get the money, and once you show and you sell that you have an impact, maybe you'll get some budget to do real LCAs in the future, hopefully. How do you even prepare for that? You got to learn a few things, maybe read about it. So I will share with you some links on how to get started. I will also share with you that maybe one day it will be, maybe one day it will be translated, but we have this eco design 115 best practices for the web. We will try also at some point to translate this magazine, because it's a special issue that has been written by Zenika and Kaizen in France, but it's fully in French, and you got a lot of insights on the green IT and eco design in there. But you need to get out there and start learning. Okay, we have a question. Are there any framework out there that was sustainably designed? No, because a framework, okay, let me show this question, and I will answer it at the same time. Okay. It's a very good question, to be honest. The answer is no most of the time. Maybe there is something small out there, but the idea of having a low-tech approach, a sustainable approach, is that you are going to tailor most of the time your IT solution to your business target. When you use a framework, you need to fit the framework. You know, it's also a concept in clean architecture and in domain-driven design, a lot of very good practices that you do not bend the framework, because if you start bending the framework, it's not maintainable that much anymore. You can't rely on the skill set of the people to understand how the framework is used and why it's used that way. So when you use a framework, you have to stick with the framework. Otherwise, there is no point using the framework. Unfortunately, most of the time, your IT targets or your product targets are slightly different than the other targets. So finding a framework that will just suit your needs is very difficult. You can find it, it happens sometimes, but the idea of eco-design is it's on the analytics basis. You need to analyze first and then choose. So the idea of using a framework for everything, like these like these silver bullets, no, it goes against the idea of eco-design. Right. So as you've seen, we have an impact on all phases, and we can get started. Once you start your report from phase 1 to the latest, you can have punctual reports, you have an incremental report, and you can also have continuous improvement in there. So good practices, referential creation, maintenance. A good practices referential is actually very, very good. I started one at some point on a project, but it didn't last long. I was a bit ashamed of that. Once you see that you have good value in your development, in your architectural decision and all, you can log this and you can share it out there as well to the other projects or to your own team, and really highlight this is what we gain doing that. So having a referential as early as possible that is focused on the green IT impact is actually very helpful. When you practice your way of doing things better and all. That's also very helpful because other people can learn by watching you do. And if you have punctual reports to management, to your peers, if you can share with these sessions as well, that's also much better. Also, you have some tools out there like ecodesign.fr and all that can give you some indexes if you are doing things right or not. If you look at performance metrics, just pure performance with a Lighthouse, with Google and all, that can be slightly helpful, but these tools, they are very, very easily manipulated. So if you want to have a perfect score, you can have it. It doesn't mean that your software is going to be eco-design. It means that you comply to the rules that was set. But that's not really the idea. That's not really the philosophy out there. So I will really be careful about that. Okay. Is that working? Yep. So an example in eco-design that already lasts since 2011. It's still a very relevant example because also it's meaningful for the Green IT collective and all, because that's where it's really started. I mean, there were a lot of initiatives before that, but this is where the first book that I showed you earlier, the first version of the book was written on the best practices on eco-design. So we had Frédéric Bordache, who worked on this project back then for a bank in Fribourg. And he used a lot of different approaches, and he logged all the time all the impacts that he had by fixing some things. So as you can see, the page loading time went from 24 seconds to 3 seconds. There was a reduction ratio of 8, and that's impactful, right? That goes into the report. He reduced the number of HTTP requests from 170 to 23 only, 6 times, dividing by 6. See, all these are really impactful. That's what you need to get out there. He also reduced the page size from 5.8 meg to only 300 KB, right? And all he did, optimizing with CSS rather than images, image compression, animation removal, all this, that's what he put in the referential. And out of the referential, he could get 115 words. If you can start your own referential and maybe update this, because of course we talk about web development only, and we talk about a certain context. If you can develop your own and showcase just like this the impact of your projects, that can go a long way. That's good for your marketing, and it's not greenwashing anymore. It's concrete marketing. It's good for the motivation of your team. You are in line with your product line. You are really focusing on the product, and you're helping your product doing this. So yeah, that's an approach that you need reporting behind it. And we circle back to Tim's presentation. Do they really do all this? Facebook, Walmart, Google, Microsoft. That was what we talked about in the beginning. The answer is yes and no. Yeah. So yes, in a way, they are doing some things, and they're really helping in their own way when it makes sense for their business. We have to be very aware of the rebound effect. We have to be aware. One of the main reasons we have to be aware of that is that most of the business models that these companies promote is actually based on the consumption of the services. Walmart is going to encourage you to buy more. Facebook, they are going to encourage you to stay more on their application. Google, to use their data centers more and to search for things, right? Even if Google, when you search for things, they will try for you to spend less time searching and more time getting results. So it really depends, but you have to be careful about the rebound effect, meaning that you have to be very careful about the habits that these companies will tend to push to you. If you become addicted to these services, you will tend to use them more, and it's not going to be that helpful and that impactful. So you have to take the good from them and maybe reassess a bit the rest, right? But they're doing some good things. And with HHVM, with Facebook, a lot of innovations come from these companies. If we didn't have Walmart, Node.js reputation would not have gotten that far, and we would still be doing heavy Java stuff with a lot of RAM and memory consumption out there. I mean, this is good. They're helping the cause in a way, but we have to be careful about the downside of things, right? But anyway, I'm not going to just say that it's evil and all, and let's not use that. It always starts with a little push. all the good initiatives, they're very impactful in the end, because that's the domino effect. Whatever you do today with a butterfly effect, maybe in the long term, this can have a bigger effect, and that's what we wish for when we talk about Green IT. So hopefully this was helpful for you, and thank you very much for attending. All right, getting Tim back for a Q&A session if you have any questions. And Tim, you are muted if you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Adrien.
If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and I do hope that you gain some insights. And if you want to chat further, of course, we will be delighted to do so. Oh, sorry. And do not hesitate also to visit these links. I will share the slides later. But you have got the Shift project. They're doing an amazing work on all things green related. The Green Spectre blog, a few of the articles are in English, so you can also read about it. greenit.fr can get a lot of insights from a lot of things that they contribute to. Of course, mostly in French, sorry for that. You have studies on the environmental footprint of the digital world. You have cloud providers comparisons, a lot of things that you can actually explore. Okay, I guess we don't have any questions, so thank you very much. And if you need to call us and all, do drop something in the chat or send us an email. You can go to zenika.sg, and you'll see that we also provide training sessions on topics that are related to Green IT as well. You can also thank you. You can also send us emails to info-singapore@zenika.com if you have any queries on that. So thank you very much for attending. I'm going to shut down the live stream if you don't have any more questions.
Thank you very much, guys.
Will be shared anywhere? Yes, they will be shared. We will send the link on the meetup.
Thank you. Have a great evening.